but I'm glad you got it.
Yeah, feels good. Melee has been going good, I guess. I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely seeing progress,
Okay, that's good.
but there's definitely like still the bad habit of me retreating into the corner. It's
Mm-hmm.
diminished a little bit at least,
Mm-hmm.
but I've noticed that when I'm trying to take more fights or at least controlling center more instead of always retreating, uh, I get to play mix-ups. It's like a different sort of mix-up than what I had originally like pictured what mix-ups are, because it's not like me or the other guy are really choosing
What do
what
you
we're
mean by
doing.
that?
I guess what I'm trying to say is more like a scramble, like choosing mix-ups in a scramble instead of like there's a clear advantage of who's in charge of the mix-up, like who has frame advantage or something,
Hmm.
specifically
Well, that would
versus
just be like
Fox.
neutral or something, right? Like when nobody has a clear advantage.
Yeah, it's definitely neutral, but it's at a point where we've both gotten close to each other and we're both inside each other's threat ranges.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like inherently more risky to not throw out a hitbox for at
Mm.
least Falco, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I'm doing better because I'm getting those situations more often, and I feel like my hitboxes are generally more threatening than Fox's are, even though he still has like the frame advantage from being faster with the jump squad and the speed. But I noticed that like what I'm choosing to do might not be the best, but I'm still happy that I'm at least getting there.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you sort of you feel confused in the scramble situations, or what do you?
Yeah, it's like I know the options that I'm choosing aren't good sometimes, but it's like hard for me to decide like what is good because a lot of the times I feel like if the fox is just holding down and waiting to shine, like if I try to like play the mix up in a way I shouldn't really call it a mix up. If I try to play the situation in a way where I'm sort of like reading what he's doing with a good option,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the times that good option is more of a delayed option, or at least not sticking a hitbox out immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it just comes down to me needing to think about the fox also just holding his space with hitboxes more often than not.
Okay. All right. I think I have a good idea with what you might be confused on right now. So let's take a look at the VOD. I'll screen share you, and then if a situation comes up where, oops, I sorry
Welcome
about
back.
that. I misclicked. I was trying to screen share you.
Nice. So I have played this guy before actually in tournament, and he
Mm-hmm.
usually beats me. But I found him on net play, and I'd say we played for about an hour and a half, and like the first half of the session, I was losing like 80% of the games, and then the second half of the session, it felt like I was choosing options that meant more
Okay.
what he was doing, and I was able to win more. And I believe I just chose
I'm a little
like
disappointed at this
where.
opening, but
Yeah.
I think it's sort of like the idea that like you are so just sort of the mindset that goes into this, and I think part of this might affect like when you're in these closer up situations, like how you're sort of thinking about it is it's sort of like a predator versus prey type mentality where you're consistently seeing yourself as like needing to defend yourself from Fox. That Fox has all these dangerous things, and you're the poor little Falco over here trying to just stay alive. And that is not the right way to look at it. You have to look at it also from your opponent's point of view, and think of how it feels to fight Falco as Fox. And it certainly does not feel like there's this vulnerable poor little Falco and you're just gonna beat him up. Like, that's not how it feels from the Fox end. Falco is a very, very scary character to fight against. And so if you sort of communicate to your opponent that you are afraid of them, they'll oftentimes play more aggressive, more confident, in ways that you don't really want them to do. So, like, you really have to think about it in the sense that, like, so you don't always want to just look at the game as, like, my opponent is scared of me, you know? But you don't also want to look at the game in a way that you're afraid of your opponent. It's a neutral situation. Like, at the very beginning of this game, no one has an advantage. And he actually does a bit of a defensive drop off the platform also, and gives you center. So, like, basically your options in this position are, you're either going to drop off platform laser or run off platform laser. There's really not a lot of other things you're probably going to do to start a match. And I think, like, you shouldn't really be worrying this early in a match, like, what could possibly... So you do this laser. This laser is not my favorite. I've seen a lot of people start the match with this laser against Fox on Stadium or whatever, and it's just, it doesn't really serve a purpose. Like, because Fox is not going to... Fox is not going to start a match on the side plat and stay there. He's always going to go to the ground. And especially on Stadium, there's no top plat for him to go to. Even if there is a top plat, it's still better to take control of the ground. But he's not going to stay here. Just drop laser. I think drop laser is the best option. A runoff laser is also good. So it's like, you have to sort of drill into your head that the situation is not advantageous or disadvantageous. Like, the Fox does not see you as a target. The Fox also sees you as something scary to be avoided at the same time. Like, you are both scared of your opponent, and you're both looking to hit your opponent. So you have to think that even if you aren't throwing out moves, because I think this is part of it, is you feel like, because you were talking about you're scared when you're up close to somebody, right? And it's because you feel like there's this threat of them instantly throwing out a move. But the thing is that, like, characters, so the way you are afraid of Fox randomly throwing out moves, they are also afraid of you randomly throwing out moves. And you have to work under that assumption that, like, even if you don't throw out a hitbox, your opponent still, if they don't want to get hit by random moves, has to space as if you could throw out those moves. So sort of like passive threats of just the fact that Falco could do something, like, is enough to keep your opponent playing the game honestly. Like, your opponent is not just going to rush you, because you have hitboxes you could be throwing out. Like, if you're, like, let's say you're on this platform and your opponent runs in and tries to attack you, and you shield, and then they bury you, and you shield drop shine. They could lose their whole stock. Let's say they run at you, and you run off the platform and down air. They could lose their whole stock. They don't want to get hit by these things. They are trying to find they are trying to find, like, a real opening. They're not just going to hit you because you're there. Because if they're trying to hit you just because you're there, you will hit them more often than not by just sort of doing basic self-protection techniques, which will lead to, like, a reversal. So that is a big point that I want to get across to you, is just that even if you do not have a hitbox out, if you are actionable, there is a threat of that hitbox coming out. It's similar to, like, I think, did we talk about dashing in the last lesson?
A little bit.
Okay, but basically just the idea that, like, yeah, if you are dashed, like, let's say Fox is here, and you're here, and you're dash dancing like this is inherently risky because he could just hit you. But a lot of times he's not going to hit you because it looks like you're about to try to hit him. And no hitboxes are out, but you are threatening him. Despite the fact that you are technically vulnerable standing here. The threat is there, and he is not... Similar to, like, if you're standing here in place, and a Fox main runs at you, and then they're dash dancing right here, and you're right here, and they're dash dancing like this. You're not thinking, within a split second of him crossing this space and dash dancing here, that, oh, he's just sitting there dash dancing, wow, he sure is vulnerable. Like, that thought is not running through your head. You're thinking, when is he going to try to hit me? Is he going to try to hit me now? Is he going to wait a second before trying to hit me? You know? Those things, it's important to keep in mind that the threats aren't just when the hitboxes are out. The threats are positioning based and, like, what the character is capable of, even if you're not doing it.
Yeah, it's basically just there all the time.
As long as you're actionable, the threat is there. And so, the way sort of Melee is just played in general is there, especially as Falco. As Puff, it's a little different. As Falco, you can't play the game in a way where you're safe all the time. That's just not going to happen. And it's true for pretty much all the characters. You can't play the game in a way where you just are totally safe. And because, okay, so like think about it. Like if you're playing the game and you're totally safe, and your opponent's playing the game and they're totally safe, no one is ever going to hit the other person. Ever. Because you're both just protecting yourself. So at some point, somebody is going to try to hit the other player, and like, if you are totally, quote, safe because you ran away and they're way over here and you're in the corner, you're like, whew, I'm safe because they can't hit me. They're not in a range to be able to hit me. But they can just close the space, and now you don't have any space left to run, and now you're potentially more vulnerable. Like, again. So it's better to be vulnerable in center stage than vulnerable in the corner. And so the way, like I was saying, the way the game is basically played is you will spend a lot of time in a spacing where your opponent could hit you. Like, this is just how the game works. You're going to spend a lot of time being, like, kind of vulnerable near your opponent. And the way you sort of play is trying to decide whether your opponent is going to actually make good on the fact that you are vulnerable. Because if they... Like, let's say Falco is just dash dancing here, or he's just even standing here. And Fox thinks he's vulnerable, and he goes for a running shine because Falco's just standing there. If Falco decides to short hop down air in place, Fox gets hit, and he could lose a stock. So even if Falco just standing here doing nothing, Fox does not feel comfortable running across the stage and shining him. Even though there's no hitbox out and Falco's simply standing there. So that's sort of the intro to that point that I want to make, and we'll go over it as we see things. But I think that's sort of like an important point. Okay, that was good. I like that a lot. This is sort of a minor point here, but like you really want to get your opponent off stage here. Like really. Yeah. Like I would say your options at this point are either you can nair. You can nair right here, you could down air again, and then maybe up tilt, and then if they DI this way, you back air or something. Like, you want to push them off stage. Going for a combo like this is not really the best thing to do. Just like a small point to mention. If you can get your opponent off stage, take them off stage. And that's actually something I've learned from pretty recently from watching Mango, is that if there's a chance to get more damage on a combo or get an edge guard on Fox specifically, he will almost always go for the edge guard situation.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that more as well because I've been trying to learn the Sheik matchup. And it's like building damage and then setting up for edge guards is like the main goal.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, in that matchup, a lot of times you do want a bit more damage because you can kill Fox a lot earlier than Sheik a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's just a lot of... Okay, so, like, let's take a situation like this. Where you're here, he drops, you're dash dancing in front of him, and he hits you like this. So, first of all, trying to dash and wave dash out of the way of Fox is just generally a bad idea, because he's so many times faster than you. And this is, like, a lesson that's been very difficult for me to learn as Falco from playing Fox for so long, but... And you've probably heard me mention this a few times on stream, whereas, like, the slow characters... So the fast characters get to protect themselves by moving away. But the slow characters have to protect themselves with moves. So, unless you're going to full hop, which isn't great here because there's no top platform, if you are afraid of Fox hitting you as Falco, your options are to shield or to try to hit him. Moving out of the way is not really an option, because he's too fast. So, if, like, let's say you were right here, and you, in this position, so you're dash dancing, and you see him here, and you are thinking, like, I can see because you dash, wave dash away, you're thinking that Fox might do something here to try to hurt you. If you're thinking that, you should just try to hit Fox here. Or shield. Those are your two options. Moving away is not an option here, because his approach will always catch you, even if you try to move away. Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
Any thoughts you have are always helpful in talking about stuff like this. But
I'm pretty sure I was just thinking he was going to do an attack out of his shield drop and wanted to move away, but he did chase me down, and yeah, as you said, you can't run away if he tries to chase you down when they're that close already.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, because you were mentioning at close range when things happen to you, and sort of, so, like, in a situation like this, yeah, like, there's no safety here. Like, there's no option you can pick here that will keep you safe from Fox's options. Any option you pick here could potentially be countered by an option that the Fox picks. But that's okay. Like, it's okay to interact in the game. Like, the goal of neutral game is not... Well, so the goal is to win without having to interact with your opponent, obviously. Like, if your opponent... Like, if you can just stand there and your opponent will keep whiffing and you can just punish them, like, obviously that is a goal. But in a lot of situations, you can't actually do that. Like this, like, just sort of the natural flow of the game, you're not always going to be able to keep yourself safe. So you end up in a situation like this, where there is no perfect safety, and what you're going to do is... You can use your intuition, you can use information you've gathered from the match, but regardless, you put everything you have together, you know, on a table, you lay it out, and you say, okay, what do I think Fox is going to do here? And intuitively, if you think he is going to approach, you should try to do an option that just beats the approach, like, straight up.
Shiner shield
like,
here,
don't think, like, the counter to this situation is to avoid the interaction. The point is to win the interaction. And it's okay that you don't have, like, it certainly would be great to have situations where you are either winning or there's no interaction. Like, that's great. And if you can do those, that's awesome. But most situations in the game where you end up close to your opponent, and that's going to happen a lot if you're trying to hit each other, and just sort of by chance, you know, you dash in, they happen to dash in, then your reaction time hits and you realize how close you are. This happens a lot. And you just have to focus on what option do I think my opponent is going to do, or maybe which few options do I think are likely. And so, like, something that's really common for Falcos to do here is they'll do, like, a fade back down air, or maybe even a short hop late down air. And this is a thing that a lot of Falcos struggle with, including me, is, especially a couple months ago, is that, like, doing late aerials, like, especially at, like, this range. Like, imagine in this position, you just empty hop above Fox. And it's kind of like, like, I'm so vulnerable, is the feeling. Is that, like, man, if he just throws out a move, he's totally just going to hit me for it. But the difference is that he's totally going to hit you anyway if he throws out a move. And if he doesn't throw out a move, so he has basically convinced you in this situation, by just basically the flow of the match, you are convinced that he is going to try to throw out a move. you're not thinking in this position that he's going to dash back. Because he's kind of in the corner, he just came off the platform. He has successfully communicated to you, accidentally or on purpose, it doesn't matter. You have been convinced he is going to attack you, and you're trying to get out of the way. Or deal with his attack in some sense. But you can actually... So remember that I said that if he drops here, and you just randomly, like, do, let's say, an up tilt, or like an early down air, or a shine or something, even though you're not doing that, he has to think about that. He has to perceive that there might be something there. And so, but you haven't communicated it, so that's fine. But if you short hop right here, he has to consider the possibility. Like, let's say he's just about to try to hit you, and then you short hop right above him. Now, Falcos, when they short hop above you, typically are trying to down air you. So, a lot of times you can sort of, like, reverse Uno card the guy and be like, oh, you're gonna hit me? Oh, actually, I'm about to hit you. And he has to decide, like, does he go with it and, like, maybe try to, like, you know, what's he really gonna do? Like, a lot of moves will trade with down air. You know, trades aren't necessarily, like, a bad thing, especially when you're pretty even percents like this. A lot of times Falco will come out of the trades on top because he's using a down air here, or his down air, and so it's kind of like, you can short hop above him, and a lot of times the Fox will give up on their plan and shield because they think you're gonna high down air, which will give them, like I said, remember you want the free punish. If they can get a free punish, they're gonna take it. So they're like, I can go for this risky attack, and Falco might attack at the same time, and then we'll maybe trade, or I might lose, and that's not very good. But they'll see you starting to short hop, or something like that, and then they'll shield, and they'll be like, but if now I see a cue that he might attack me. So if I shield and he does this early aerial, I get a shine at a shield, and then that's a risk-free punish. That's what they want. That's, like, more ideal than this scary, dangerous scrap situation. Like, this is scary for both of you, not just you. Mm-hmm. And so, by doing the late aerial here, you jump up, and he goes, I think I need to defend against the early aerial with a shield or something, and then you get the late aerial into a shield pressure, and suddenly you won the situation. And that is not a guarantee. It's never a guarantee. There's always going to be risk here. But the point is that you sort of just have to ignore the fact sometimes that your opponent could hit you in favor of, like, basically, like, yelling louder. Like, they're like, I'm gonna hit you, and you're like, I'm gonna hit you, and they're like, whoa, maybe he means it, you know? Like, you have to, like, it's like, you can't just take what your opponent says that they're gonna hit you and just, like, deal with it. Sometimes you have to kind of, like, and, like, a lot of times even, like, just the show of confidence, you know? Like, you'll see a lot of times, there's a video online of, like, these cows, and the cow gets angry, and it's charging a goose. And the cow charges, and it's like this huge cow that weighs thousands of pounds charging this little goose. And the goose simply does nothing. The goose just stands there like, yeah, come on, bring it here. Like, let's see what you got. And the cow rushes all the way up to the goose. And then it stops, and it's like, whoa. Like, he's not afraid of this at all. Like, why is he not afraid? What is he going to do to me if I continue this charge? And the answer is nothing. If the cow kept charging, he would literally murder the goose instantly. But, like, by projecting the idea that, like, I am not afraid of this option, which is why I'm standing here. If I was afraid, I would be getting out of the way, but I'm not. Therefore, maybe you should consider that you're in danger. And, like, it's a bluff. But they, like, what do they know? You know, they just see you sitting there confidently. They think you might attack, you know? And so sort of this sort of game that is beyond, like, the situational game, the game of, like, being able to show your opponent, like, I am not afraid, and the reason I'm not afraid is because I'm about to hit you. And if you can sort of convince your opponent that you are the one that is going to attack them instead of being attacked, sometimes they'll believe it. And playing this sort of game of, like, do you believe me? Do I believe you? This is, like, a very important part of these close-up situations.
I definitely feel that whenever playing the situations out.
Feel what?
The threatening, as you said, like yelling, "I'm gonna hit you harder" or whatever. However you, because like sometimes it is just that risky. They'll see you do something and then they stop altogether
Mm-hmm.
and will hold shield.
Right, yeah.
And then sometimes I'll do something good, and other times I will throw the early down air and give them the free punish, But
Mm-hmm. And that's the
learning.
thing, that is just like life, basically. Is like
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to be perfect. It is a guessing game. Ultimately, the game comes down to a guessing game. If both players have equal skill in all other areas, and especially in something like a Ditto, like there's no way you can get an advantage over your opponent with your character. Let's say they have exactly equal tech skill, they have exactly equal game knowledge. It comes down completely to being able to threaten, bluff, ignore threats, decide when your opponent is full. Like, let's say, you see an opponent and they have decided to attack you, and they have earplugs in and they've closed their eyes, and they're not going to listen or see. Like, nothing you do can convince them not to attack you, right? And you can kind of feel it, that they're just hard committed to hitting you. No matter if you stand there and look confident, they're just going to run you over. Then those are the cases where it simply becomes predictable that they're going to attack you, and you can just counter their attack, let's say with an up tilt. So when a fox is running and you go, well, I can tell you're just going to attack me no matter what I do, so I'll just throw out the counter to your approach. Okay, so this is an example of a really common situation in the matchup. It's not bad for this situation to come up, although KJH recently has been making this very annoying because he always power shield down tilts. So this situation in like a couple of years might not be that good for Falco. But currently it's pretty even against most foxes because they'll do this sort of thing. And like, sort of once again, there's this situation where like you're in this sort of scramble after this down air where he's like, so he was coming in before this. He was coming in before this. Sort of realizing the communication that's going on here is very important. And so it's obviously separate from like the situational game of move choice and DI and stuff like that. And so it's a little bit more abstract and difficult to grasp, but because you're a human, you can get this. This is just how people are. Like, people can feel it when somebody is really being aggressive or being really defensive. You don't really need to think of it in terms of like necessarily why, because a lot of it is small timing cues and stuff that basically go to like the body language part of our brain to determine what the opponent is thinking. So, okay, so we end up here, and he's like, I'm coming in, and you go, okay, so if you come in, this down air will hit you in the face. And this is a very common situation in the matchup, and I think it's generally good. Like I said, maybe in a couple years it won't be good for Falco to do this, but currently this is fine. So, this happens, and so you have successfully stopped his approach. Because he tried to approach, you said no way with the down air, and you end up in this very even situation, but he has a slight frame advantage because you have to land out of the down air. So he does this wave dash in. So the communication here was, I'm approaching, and you said, you better not because this attack will hit you, and he shields it. And then his communication by instantly wave dashing in after this is, I am still coming for you. Like, I am still going to go in for the attack. And so, in this case, you go for a retreat again. But, once again, this is not going to solve your problem, If your opponent is saying they're for sure going to rush in, your options are throw out a move or shield. Dashing away is not an option here, at all. It literally is just not an option.
Yeah, I thought with the power shield he was going to get pushed far enough away that I could dash back, but it was not so.
So here's the thing with that, though, is that by pushing him far away, he is unable to do anything to you, and you dash back, you have not improved the situation for yourself at all. And it's okay to not necessarily be improving the situation for yourself at every single moment, but you don't, think about how you would feel if every time there was a threatening position, your opponent simply, as Fox, dashed back. You start to get comfortable. It starts to feel like you can kind of get away with a lot more things. And so it's sort of like that confidence thing where you want like a sort of like threatening aura where you're like, I am going to like move at you. So here's a good situation where, so you hit him with this approach, it was a pretty good approach, and now you're dashing in. And it's like, if you think about this under like the previous framework, it's like, you are pretty vulnerable during this dash in. At any point here, he could have hit you. But you're like, I'm coming in, and he respects that. And he's not going to try to hit you here because you have already, he is much more willing to try to counter your approach than try to run straight into it because, you know, he's at higher percent. He's probably going to lose a trade.
Yeah.
So when you have this really good communication that you're approaching, like this was a very clear situation where you have convinced your opponent that you're coming in. This is when you don't want to actually come in. Like, what you want is you want this situation where you have fully convinced your opponent that you are coming in. He allows you to gain space with this dash. Everything is looking scary for him because you know that in these situations, your opponent is not going to let you hit them. In a situation like this, your opponent is either going to move out of your way or they're going to throw out a move. And so both of those will beat you actually following through on the exact thing you're going to do. Like if somebody says like, you know, be at this place, like let's say you're in a life or death struggle and somebody's like, all right, meet me outside this building at 4 p.m. and we'll fight to the death. You know, at 4 p.m. you're definitely going to be in the bushes hiding with like a gun. You know, you're not going to show up and fight the guy when it's a life or death struggle. Like, he gave you all this information. You're not going to just play into his hands, you know? You're going to do something that allows you to get around what he is telling you about. So you are telling him for sure, here I come, I'm going to hit you. Stay right there, don't move, here it comes. And, like, he's not going to just let you do it, like, ever. Like, if he is a decent player, the only thing in the game you won't be able to get away with is exactly what you told him you were about to do to him. Like, you're like, I'm about to punch you on the left side of your face with a roundhouse punch. And you rear back for the roundhouse punch. The one thing he's never going to get hit by is the roundhouse punch to the left side of your face. Ever. Like, he's just, like, no one in the world would ever get hit by that. Ever. There's no reason to, because you just told him about it. And so, like, by telling him, here I come, I'm about to hit you right now, stay right there, he's not going to let you do it. And so the fact that you continue committing to this is, like, too honest, you know? Like, you're like, here I come, I'm going to do it, and he goes, okay, I'm going to counter it, and you go, great, and you run right into it. And so what you want is you want to communicate, here I come, this is going to happen, you want this communication, and then you want to use this communication to trick him into defending against the thing that isn't coming, and then hit him. And Mango's really good at this. He'll dash in, and his dash-ins are so scary. He's like, here I come, and then the opponent tries to deal with it, and he just does a little dash back, dash in, like laser approach, they shield, and then it's all over for them. And definitely don't get stuck laser or jab down tilting as Falco. Not a great idea. I also get stuck doing that. It's really not very good. And, okay, so for this laser, so these two lasers are fantastic. This one, and then this laser. And the reason is, he is right at the range after this first laser to get hit by late down air. So, like, the thing is, when people are really close, they're not really at a great range to get hit by late down air. That's more of like an early down air range. So they're a lot more likely to shield after they get lasered because they're like, you know,
I don't want to get early down aired.
Right, but in this situation, you can't actually early down air him. And so when you jump, this laser is kind of indistinguishable, like reaction time wise, from you doing an empty hop here to do a late down air. So he just has to, he sees you jumping, but he doesn't really know what it's going to be, and he's at just the perfect range for you to do a late down air and kind of mess him up here. So he has decided to get out of your way, and he's thinking, okay, if he does a late down air here, I don't want to be here for any of that. And if he lasers here, maybe I'll dash away that I'll be far enough away so it'll be fine. And that's what happens, is you laser him here, and he shields. This is kind of a bad shield, but it's fine. So he gets lasered here. He's now shielding. He's facing away, and you have this spacing. And so what you do is you throw out another laser here. Oh my goodness, he jumps over it. Okay, so I actually don't really blame you for this, but at the same time, I think doing this laser, like... So, like, let's say he was shielding here, and then you lasered him, and so you got the laser, this previous laser, and he shields this laser. He shields this laser right here. You were not paying any attention whether he shielded this laser or not.
No,
you were already 100% committed. I'm going to shoot 3 lasers in a row. So, what are the things that can happen if you shoot 3 lasers in a row? The options are you can hit him with all 3 lasers, or during one of those lasers he can hit you, which is what happens. And so you want to be a lot more conscious with the way these lasers come out, because if you had, let's say, gotten this laser on his shield, this one that he reflected over here, and you don't go for this laser, let's say you do a dash dance instead, you're putting a lot more pressure on him here than if you just do another laser. Like, is this laser going to get you an opening, you know? And there's no world. The only thing that this laser will do is basically get you maybe slightly closer to him in his shield, which in some matchups is not too bad. Like in the Ditto, that's pretty good. But in this matchup, if Fox, after he shielded this laser, he could simply full hop up to the platform, and you wouldn't have gotten anything. Like, there would be nothing there. But if you do this laser, he shields it, and then you start dash dancing, suddenly he's worried, because let's say if he full hops and you full hop shine him, you know, there's ways that you can counter all of his movement. There's more of a threat here. So let's say you dash dance, but you don't really like what he's doing, then maybe you throw in a laser, you know? And so, like, you have to be using these lasers consciously to, like, create potential openings for your actual moves. The lasers themselves are actually kind of risky. So that's something that's important to keep in mind there.
I definitely think that's something I've been struggling with recently, is like shooting my lasers at a timing that gives me a reasonable reaction window to like land an actual opening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like how many lasers I shoot. Just So here's the thing with Falco, is Falco you can shoot lasers and then look for your opponent to do something dumb which gives you an opening, basically. Or like commit to something which gives you an opening. And that is a very sort of common, like, solid way to use lasers. That is like the most prevalent way to use lasers, is basically you laser somebody and then people will throw out something dumb and then you get an opening. But ultimately, at higher levels of play, that is not really going to happen as much. Like, you're not going to laser somebody, and then they just, like, randomly
like,
F-smash.
He shot me, and, like, just give you an opening. Like, they're not gonna do that. Like, these people have been getting lasered by Falcos for, like, a decade of their life. Like, they are not going to just give you free openings, otherwise they would be losing to every random net play Falco. So at some point, this same logic that we were going over of, like, the scramble here, this needs to be taken into account for when you are playing, when you're actually in, like, a laser advantage state. Like, say you laser this guy and he shields, yeah, you don't have a direct opening. And yeah, if you dash dance right next to his shield, he might hit you. But the truth is that he's usually not gonna, because you look like you're about to hit him, you know? So even though his character can technically hit you, most of the time he won't. And if he does, that's just kind of how it goes. Like, sometimes you'll just get hit. And so you need to play more for, like, your own openings than worrying about what he's gonna do to you. And the thing is like, yeah, as Falco, you're kind of a glass cannon. If you don't worry about what your opponent is going to do to you, then you're just going to get bodied. like ever, or like if you never think about it, playing no fear Falco is usually not the play. Mango has lost to some players who he is much better than because he plays no fear Falco in like top 16 or something like that. So here's a good summary for it: is you want to pick your spots. If there is a position that you don't want to play, like a mix-up, like something dangerous, you feel like your opponent is in an advantageous position against you there, then don't play it. Then it's okay to do like the sort of not uninteractive, but like disengaging and going back to neutral game, full hopping around, or rolling, stuff like that. Those types of things are good to avoid spots that you don't want to fight in. Like, especially, like, let's say your opponent's intention is kind of unclear, so you don't feel like you have a good read on the situation of who's approaching, who's defending, stuff like that. If you don't feel like you have, like, a clear understanding of the situation, then feel free to disengage and don't fight it. But when you're in a situation like this, where you have control and the situation is looking really good for you, and you know sort of what's going on, like this is a very, like you clearly, like if you told someone which character do you want to be here, if ignoring these stocks and stuff like that, just purely positionally, you would want to be Falco, here. And so you go, okay, this is a good spot, and once you have attained the good spot that you're going to fight in, then you just completely ignore what your opponent can do to you. Because at some point, you're going to have to ignore it and fight it out anyway. And so, what better place, what better time than this, when you're in this really good position to choose to sort of get a little risky and kind of play it out more. So, in positions like this, what might be really good here is you could do like a late aerial, or you can do a dash dance. You can even like maybe dash dance grab here. A lot of people will stay shielding if you dash dance right next to them. So there will always be these points where you have to worry about risk and worry about like, is this a really good spot? But once you have determined that this is a good spot, it's okay to literally guess. Like it's okay. You're not going to be able to react to everything in the game. And trying to do so actually puts you at a pretty big disadvantage.
I definitely think I've been getting into good positions and then being more afraid of being outplayed than being, okay, I've got my good position, let me play this good position now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ignore that.
And I think that's something that Mango is really good at, is like, it looks, from a spectator's perspective, it looks like, so, and I'm not talking about the matches where Mango is obviously just playing way too aggro, and a lot of times when he does that, it's very ineffective, and I've seen him drop sets to say, plop or spark, for like, really going in way too hard when he really shouldn't be, and so, like, usually when you watch Mango, it feels like he's approaching, like a lot. Like it feels like he's going for like really risky mix-ups and they just all kind of work. That is like the spectator perspective on Mango, and it's part of what makes him so fun to watch. But that is actually, when you play against Mango, it doesn't feel like that at all. That is not how it feels as a good player when you play against Mango. What it feels like is that he is very carefully picking his positions so that when he does get to fight you and he does go for his approach or his risky mix-up, he is at like an overwhelming positional advantage. Or like not even positional, he is at an overwhelming like communication advantage. Where like you are for sure thinking that Mango is about to try to hit your shield, and so when he just dash dances in front of you or lasers your shield, it just comes out of nowhere every time seemingly, and it's because he's waiting for a position where he knows what's going on. Like he's actually a very patient player when it comes down to it. He knows not to go in like if like a lot of Falcos, if the Fox just sits there with their back turned, at some point they'll do something dumb and like down air in and get up tilted. But Mango,
I've
a
done
lot of
that.
times that doesn't happen. If you try to play like that against Mango, he will almost always wait out your up tilt and hit you for it. And the reasoning is that he doesn't like that position. He doesn't know, like, what you're going to do there. And so he won't take it. He's not going to take the bait. He's not going to go in then. But when he likes the spot, suddenly you get this, like, kind of like, Hail Mary, crazy, aggressive option, And so those are, like, what you're looking for, is your opportunities to play within the risk and play a situation to outplay. So, like, this is good. So, like, yeah, he's invincible here, but this is just generally, like, if you, like, basically the example here is he's invincible and you don't like that, so you're not going to fight him here. So you're disengaging, which is good. And so now you're here. Okay, I mean, see, that was a whiff punish. That was really good. You reacted very well to him doing that. Ooh, looks like you missed your down air or something.
Yeah.
Okay, that happened.
Been not clean on the C-stick recently.
It could be your controller. Like the controllers can sometimes like,
yeah, I might need
the
new potentiometers for my
kind of
C-stick.
messed up.
Alright. That made a lot of sense though. Definitely choosing spots where I'm communicating a certain message or just like trying to, and understanding what I'm communicating is going to do to my opponent, and like choosing spots that way.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So yeah, so there's that, and also just like recognizing that like there are situations where attempting to disengage is just losing. Like, it's just not good. And like sometimes you're gonna have to fight in uncomfortable positions and like just choose a mix up and do it and ignore the risk. The thing is like people will think, okay, I have to choose a mix up, but they're like, but I also kind of want to choose a safe mix up, and they'll never late aerial. They'll never late aerial because they're like, but early down air like kind of protects me while I do the mix up, so I kind of get my little safety blanket or whatever. And it's kind of like, no, you gotta just like, if there's a position and it's time to fight, you want the biggest mix up pool possible. You don't want your opponent to go, every time he's in a bad spot, he only plays mix-ups. He only plays 3 different decisions on this mix-up, You want to feel like you're just totally free to do any option you feel like whenever you're going to fight. And that makes it a lot scarier for your opponent when, like, you aren't showing fear when you have decided to fight. Like, don't allow it to make you, like, partially commit. So, yeah, so there's that. And then there's, what were you talking about with, like, picking the spots and stuff like that. But basically, like, when a position presents itself and you have decided that now is the time to fight, don't sort of go halfway. It's okay to, if you are calling out that your opponent is not going to do something to you, it's okay to empty hop over their head and just be vulnerable for, like, a full half a second because you have decided already that they are not going to do something to you. Okay, sort of normal Fox Falco. Nice. Okay, good wave dash and shine. Good up tilt. I like that a lot. Okay, missed the combo, but that happens. That's something separate to work on. Oh, that nair was like a little questionable. So, like, you get these lasers. There's nothing wrong with doing these multiple lasers. But it kind of feels like you're like, laser. Oh yeah, I've got him now. Like, laser, haha. Like, do something about this, Fox. Laser. And you're like, wait a minute, that's too many lasers. Random nair, like, with no thought behind it. Like, it feels like the nair is almost because you feel like you were shooting too many lasers, rather than being like a nair that like at this range, approaching nair is not, like, just doing just like an early nair here, not really the best option. And if he had just kept shielding this, which he started to do initially, you would have just gotten shrine out of shield. So this is kind of the thing I'm talking about with, like, the late aerials of, like, by sort of thinking that, like, or approaching laser or late aerials are, like, the same thing. Where, like, okay, you've kind of determined that he's kind of hanging out in place right here. So by going for this nair, like, I don't know, like, if you look at the communication, let me just approach this from a different direction. Like, if you look at the communication that he is communicating to you, it's like, okay, he turned around and shielded a laser. Now he tries to get away, and he gets caught by another laser. And then he decides, you know what, forget this, I'm going in. And he gets hit by another laser, or he sees you lasering, he turns around and shields again. And then you do another laser, and he tries to back air, it hits him, and now you're here, and you're like, alright, now I'm getting this really close laser, and the idea I could tell here is you see this close laser, and you're like, now I'm going to close laser early aerial. But he has demonstrated over and over again that he is going to dash away and shield here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is clearly what he's been thinking from all these past lasers. And so by going in here, you are basically ignoring the fact that he kept dashing away and shielding these lasers, because you're saying, like, now I'm going to do an option that literally loses to dash away shield.
Holding shield.
And you happen to hit him here, but the nair itself doesn't take into account, like, what he's been doing, or even, like, what this communicates of, like, lasering in place again and then immediately going in is fine, but you can't just go in with this early aerial after he's been shielding all these lasers, because he's just probably going to shield. Like, in 9 times out of 10, your opponent will probably shield this. And so, like, you know, you could maybe dash dance grab here, you can do a late aerial, you can laser on his shield, you could even, like, do something like you move in and then you literally move away, and you're just like, oh, maybe I'm going to give you some space, then you laser and you go in, you know? So basically just sort of adding layers to, like, the mix-up here, rather than sort of, like... So basically, if you don't look at any of these previous things that happened... So, like, we see all these lasers, but so basically by doing this nair, you ignored, like, all this previous stuff that happened. So that's what we can do as a spectator here, is let's just ignore all of these. And so we're here, or here. So Fox is actionable on the ground. He's standing right in front of you, right? And then you go for... So let's pretend the match started right here, basically. Like, we just popped in, you know, it's like that spot in Inception when they just suddenly in the cafe or whatever. Like, you're just here. There is no previous interaction. And what happens is you laser, and Fox kind of dashes away, and you just fling an instant nair at him. And if you just saw any random Falco do this on Unranked, you would say, that was a pretty bad nair. And so, this nair could be good if it took into account some sort of previous information, but it's actually the opposite, where this nair is, like, basically flying in the face of all this previous information that you got from lasering him a bunch of times. So, it's just something to keep in mind there, that, like, if you're going to approach, you sort of want it to, like, take into account the things that have been happening before you do this. Rather than sort of just being like, well, I lasered him a bunch and I got close, so if I throw out this nair, maybe it has a better chance of hitting. That it's not really... It's not, you know, the logic you would expect from, say, the best player in the world or something like that, and so therefore it's not really the logic you want to be using for throwing out your aerials. Because it feels kind of like you got all these lasers, which were good, and then basically ignored everything and went for this nair. And it worked, but it's not... doesn't mean it's advisable.
Yeah. I actually think I reacted to his back air and thought that the laser that hit him out of back air was going to miss. The following laser nair, I thought the spacing was going to be a bit more ambiguous. And just wanted to, like...
Okay, I mean, okay, so in this particular instance, maybe it's fair, but I was bringing it up more as, like, something that I've seen a few times in the session, or the game.
Oh, and it's definitely happened, and will happen.
But it's if that specific instance wasn't a perfect example of it, it's fine. It's just what it looks like in the game, so...
Yeah, I definitely do that occasionally. Probably more often than not, unfortunately.
Okay, I hate the missed wavelands. I do those way too often. And yeah, sort of like this laser nair too is like, it just... it's just loses. Like there's no reason for him to have gotten shined here at all, and so it's kind of like you want things to be loaded. That's sort of something I tell people a lot is like you want there to be so much information in things you do where like if somebody went by, ideally, right? Obviously it's melee, it's fast, it's really hard to be like perfect. So I'm not expecting it to be in every case. But in a situation where you have control of a situation, like this situation where he's shielding and you got your laser out and everything like that, you want it to be like, if you had like an analysis desk or something, you want them to say, oh, like, there was this, and like, he did this, and he hard read this from his opponent, and et cetera, and like, oh, he was using this because of this positioning and like the previous ways that this interaction had gone before. You don't want them to look and say like, yeah, that's a nair, because the more information you can load onto your actions, that like, I am doing this for X and Y reasons, and I am doing it in this position and stuff like that, the more information that goes toward why you did a move, generally the more successful a move will be. There's that laser nair again. Generally not great, especially at low percent. At low percents against Fox, I was actually going over this with Ginger recently. He was kind of drilling it into me, no pun intended, that like at low percents against Fox, basically like sub 20 or 30, you basically never want an early aerial. It's all lasers, shines, grabs, and late aerials. Because there's just too many cases where, like, even if you do hit him with the move, it's not going to...
You just get reversaled.
Yeah, you just get reversaled, exactly.
I definitely know that feeling.
So that's just, like, another thing to note. Okay, good grab. Not a great grab. Okay. Also not a great grab. Got really grabby all of a sudden. Ooh, that was almost really, really good. I like that down air. Yeah, and you just kind of start... Like, that whole last part of the game was just you kind of doing stuff and kind of hoping that it hits, and it lost a lot of, like, the systematic nature from, like, your earlier play. And I understand that. It's, like, last stock against this guy, and you're just kind of trying to, like, clean it up. So I understand it, but it's something to sort of just, like, stay cognizant of. That, like, sort of taking into account this, like, communication stuff and taking into account, like, the picking your spots, you should be able to say, like, the reason why I did this is because of X and Y reasons, rather than it simply being a nair because sometimes doing a nair is, like, a mix-up,
Yeah.
So I think...
I definitely find myself doing that more often than I want to.
Yeah, and the thing is like, there's always going to be times when you're doing these moves sort of subconsciously that you don't really want to be doing, but the goal is to replace as many of them as possible with moves that have thought behind it. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you for a second.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah, I definitely think it's part of the being afraid, and like the only way I could get no fear from these quote-unquote mix-ups or like spots where I want to be attacking is by just going in immediately because, early aerial.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally feel
you.
that.
Yeah.
Like, that is a really common thing. It's kind of like, well, I don't want to be just so passive, but you don't really know how to, like, really go in, but you also just don't want to be so passive that you're just sitting around and waiting to lose. So you sort of just, at certain points randomly, will kind of throw out an aerial. But that is obviously not ideal. And so I think a lot of the stuff we were talking about with the communication and picking your spots, like, it's okay to disengage sometimes, but when you really have a spot, you want to go for an option that you think will beat whatever your opponent is doing and ignore the risk. That's like why the best Falcos get so many approaching lasers, despite approaching laser being like the most vulnerable thing Falco can do. Yeah. Like, Mango gets approaching laser on shield so often, like way more often than I can possibly get, and I've been working on it really hard. He's just very, very good at knowing when it's okay to do that. And knowing when it's okay, he'll figure out a spot where he goes, this is a spot where I feel very comfortable that my opponent will not hit me out of my approaching laser. And then going for it because he thinks that the approaching laser will beat his opponent's option, and ignoring the fact that they could potentially hit him out of it, because if they do, that means he misappraised the situation, which